I'm with the wonderful artist Carey Newman at the Museum of History, and we're here to talk about this wonderful witness blanket that has many stories behind it, and also it bears witness to many, many things that change something within us when we see it. So how long was this in the making, Carey?
I started to try to come up with the idea for what eventually became the Witness Blanket in 2010. That was when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released their call for commemoration initiatives. It also happens to be the year that my daughter Addie was born. And so I set my mind to trying to think of what I could do to tell some of the stories of residential school survivors from across the country. My dad, Victor, is a residential school survivor, and I grew up knowing just a little bit about what his experience was like there, and I wanted to make something to honor that. So 2010 was when I started to think about it. I came up with the idea properly in 2012, and we completed the Witness Blanket and unveiled it for the very first time in 2014. So it was about a 4-year process.
And you are a woodcarver after many other transformations in the art world.
I started out designing prints, making jewelry. Eventually I graduated to making wood carvings, masks, and sculptures out of stone and metal, and finally totems. And I'd say that's maybe my primary artistic practice, is carving monumental size totems. But none of those ideas really fit with how to tell the story of experiences of survivors, especially when I wanted it to be about stories from all across the country.
They certainly move you. There are parts here that you really identify with. Do you miss it now that it's complete, or is it not truly complete?
The first answer is, yeah, I miss it. Whenever I get to come and spend time with one of the replicas or go and see the original, I always feel it like pull me back in, and I try to find a couple of minutes to spend, or a half an hour or an hour to spend connecting with it. So I do miss it. Now, although the blanket and the replicas are complete, the project is not. We continue to make new ways of sharing the stories that are attached to the Witness Blanket. Some of them are in the form of a book or a documentary film, and the more recent one that I've been working on is a virtual reality version of the blanket, where the sounds that you're going to hear when you're inside the headset are sounds of the very cultures that were under attack from residential schools. So the languages, the cultural practices, the voices of elders and the voices of children, so that different people will have a different experience with that virtual reality.
I feel that it's probably alive when you're in front of it, that photography doesn't really do justice to what you have produced. There's an exchange of energy when you're in front of an original piece of art.
I think that's true, or at least that's something that I feel. And when I was gathering all the objects and they were slowly coming into my studio and I was measuring them and figuring out how I was going to fit them together, I could feel the energy that each of them had, and it's something that really stuck with me in the way that I think about material when it comes to making art, because this is made of so many different things, so many different kinds of material, and I really started to feel a connection to them in a much, much different way than I had before. And it's carried on over the last 10 years of my artistic practice to where I better understand the teachings of my elders, who would say to me, you know, you have to respect this grandmother log, this grandfather tree. You have to respect the material that you're working with. And I always kind of intellectually understood that, but I really started to feel it when I knew about the stories behind the objects that make up the witness blanket.
Yes, so you have a wonderful, you can't call it really a contract with the Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg. You have a very special relationship that you've created, and probably the first in Canada or anywhere.
We do. We call it a stewardship agreement. And rather than having the witness blanket be acquired into the collection and become a piece of property that's owned by the museum, instead we share responsibility to care for it, to act in its best interest. And all of the rights associated with the blanket are placed on the blanket in the stories that it carries. And yeah, it's a written contract, so we have all of our commitments to each other in the blanket sort of laid out in written form, but we also enacted it through ceremony, where we stood in front of our communities and we spoke our commitments to each other into the blanket, and we called witnesses who now have the role of holding us to those commitments.
And you have a very special person who is the keeper of the blanket.
When I started making this, I said that I was making it for my father, a residential school survivor, and for my daughter, who represents the future generations. And over time, she's the same age as the idea. Over time, she's continued to stay connected to it and continued to come to events around the witness blanket, and last year she agreed to become the future keeper of the blanket. And so in our traditions we have something called holding space, and so at the moment her job is to come with me sometimes, to hear what people are saying, to hear what I'm saying, to start the process of understanding how we take up that responsibility, how we make decisions when we have that responsibility. And so I'm very, very proud that she's agreed to do it. And that adds to my responsibilities to be her guide, to be her teacher.
Yes, and I'm sure you will. And I'd like to thank you very much for looking after the future generations as well as the present. As you say, you respect the past, the present, and the future.
It really is an honor to do it.
Thank you very much, Carey.
Thank you.
I've been speaking with Carey Newman, who is the artist of this wonderful witness blanket.